asked her if she was surprised at the timing of this election.
Well, I was very surprised that he suddenly called the election today. I didn't know anything about it until I started getting WhatsApps from various friends about the sort of things that started to line up, because I don't think we had thought. There's obviously always the possibility of a July election within that formula that the Prime Minister had used of his working assumption that the election would be in the second half of the year. But I think everybody had assumed it was a question of when in the autumn, not that he would go in July.
And this is the fourth general election, or will be, over the past 10 years. Is that unusual for the UK?
Well, this election, I think, is, many people would say, rather long overdue. This is a government that's gone for over 4 years. The maximum time that the Prime Minister can be in office is 5 years. So Rishi Sunak was running out of road, if you like. He had to call an election by next January. I think the abnormalities, if you like, were the elections in 2017 and 2019, when we had that sort of, the 2015, 2017, 2019, we've actually had a sort of, almost a full-term parliament this time round. So we did know that there was going to be an election. I think almost the Prime Minister has decided to put the country out of its misery of just waiting around, with the only question everybody in Westminster asking is, when is he actually going to call the election?
And let's talk about the significance or the impact that this election could have overseas. On foreign policy first, how much of a distinction is there between the Conservatives and Labour?
I think on sort of the big international issues, not that much at the moment. Perhaps Keir Starmer would, in government, Keir Starmer, the potential Labour Prime Minister, if Labour wins the election, might come under more pressure from within his party in taking a line backing Israel on the Gaza conflict. We've seen a bit of that happening, but basically he's been pretty much backing Rishi Sunak's line. On Ukraine, I think you would see very, very little difference indeed. There's a slight difference in the formula the two parties are using on increasing defence spending. I think the area that you would potentially expect to see a bit of a difference, though less of a difference than if Rishi Sunak's premiership hadn't happened, is on Europe. Labour is very clear that it sees Europe as a top foreign policy priority. David Lammy, who is the shadow foreign secretary, has been saying this is, top of his agenda is to improve relations with the EU, to perhaps move to more structured foreign and defence policy cooperation. And one of the things that's really interesting, given the timing of the election, is the UK last year had committed to host this new European formation called the European Political Community. Number 10 spent ages basically annoying people in Europe by not setting a date. They then have set a date, but the date they set is July the 18th.
Which so it could be a new Prime Minister.
After the UK election.
Interesting. And there are other summer diplomacies going on. The G7 is being hosted in Italy in June. Rishi Sunak will definitely be in power then. A chance to shine on the world stage as he sees it, perhaps?
I think one of the things Prime Ministers quite like is for these international events to happen during a general election, because the Labour leader can't get to go. It will get lots of international coverage, and you will see Rishi Sunak joshing with Emmanuel Macron, walking around with Joe Biden and things like that. So it's, particularly given his pitch that we heard when he was getting soaked in Downing Street, that he's a sort of trusted leader. You don't want to take risks in a very uncertain world. And I'm sure Rishi Sunak will see that as an opportunity to convey the impression that he's a known quantity. He already has those relationships. Keir Starmer doesn't have that, by virtue of the fact that Keir Starmer's not been Prime Minister. So that will be a few potentially good days for the Prime Minister when he can show that he is a world statesman.
And very briefly, I suppose a summer election will give plenty of time for the new government to settle in ahead of US elections in November.
Yes, I think that's quite important. There was a sort of danger that an autumn election might get tied up with the US election. Would it be the week before, the week after? Would the world be trying to come to terms with the potential change of power in the US? So I think by going for a July date, he's managed to put clear water between the UK election and the US election.